Hello once again, this is Mom Liz. This is the continuation on the discussion on climate change impacts to forest, ecosystem, and agriculture and food supply. So we are done with range shifts. Let us proceed to food web disruptions. Okay. So what is a food web? It has its definition here. A food web is a group of predators and prey that interact in a habitat or ecosystem. Okay, so a food web, it has a relationship. No, it represents a feeding relationships within a community. It is a natural interconnection of food chains and a graphical representation of what eats what in an ecological community. So sa food web, it is a series of food chains. So dahan mo makita sa food web kung unsay kaunon sa certain species and kung kinsay mukaon ato nga certain species. So because of climate change, there will be food web disruptions. So what do you mean by that? Okay, the impact of climate change on a particular species can ripple through a food web and affect a wide range of other organisms. So like I mentioned a while ago, no nga ang effects sa climate change is a domino effect. Now, if ma-extinct ang certain species because of rising temperature, of course, maapektuhan ang food distribution. Because ang mga species nga naa sa atong ecosystem is interconnected. Okay? Interconnected, buot pasabot, nana sila'y kaugalingon nilang mga purpose. And if that purpose will be gone, so matigaw no ang ato ang ecosystem. And it will lead to food web disruptions. Okay, next is the buffer and threshold effects. Ecosystems can serve as natural buffers from extreme events such as wildfires, flooding, and drought. Climate change and human modification may restrict ecosystems' ability to temper the impacts of extreme conditions and thus may increase vulnerability to damage. So, ang ecosystem is a natural buffer zone from extreme events or from forest disturbances. And then because of climate change and also because of human modification, it may restrict, no, or it may hamper ecosystems' ability to withhold extreme events. And if dili na niya kaya pugnan ang extreme events, it may increase its vulnerability to damage. So examples include reefs and barrier islands that protect coastal ecosystems from storm surges, wetland ecosystems that absorb floodwaters, and cyclical wildfires that clear excess forest debris and reduce the risk of dangerously large fires. So examples are reefs, no, and barrier islands or coral reefs. So sila, mo-protect na sila sa coastal ecosystems. Now, if mawala na sila or if maguba na sila, what will happen, no, to the community nga ilahang kinaprotektahan? So it will be more prone to damages because nawala na ang tig-protect sa ilahang ecosystem. So in some cases, ecosystem change occurs rapidly and irreversibly because a threshold or tipping point is passed. Okay, so similarly, when coral reefs become stressed from increased ocean temperatures, so this is known as coral bleaching, no? Coral bleaching. Oh, wait lang. Okay, so coral bleaching. So, unsa man ang coral bleaching? So, mauni siya nga phenomenon pag ma-stress ang coral reefs, no, because of increased ocean temperatures, because of pollution, because of many factors, because of climate change in general. They expel or magpagawa sila og microorganisms that live within their tissues and are essential to their health. This is known as coral bleaching. So, magpagawa sila og microorganisms nga naa sa sulod sa ilaha which are essential or which are helpful to their health. Ipagawas nila. So kung nakakita mo sa mga news kana bitong coral reefs nga mawala ang iyahang color. So that's an example of coral bleaching. So ang main reason niya is because of stress from increased ocean temperature. So ang naga-increase is dili lang ang temperature diri as sa land. No, even sa ocean, sa ilalom sa ocean, ang temperature pod is naga-increase. So dili lang kita nga mga tao, wildlife sa forest, and trees sa forest ang affected with climate change. So also, the microorganisms, the wildlife, the flora and fauna in the ocean, affected pod na sila. So as ocean temperatures warm and the acidity of the ocean increases, bleaching and coral die-offs are likely to become more frequent. Chronically stressed coral reefs are less likely to recover. So sa magkainit ang temperature sa ocean, and then mo increase pod ang acidity, so bleaching and coral die-offs will be more frequent. And if that happens, stressed coral reefs are less likely to recover. So less likely, there is a very minimal chance for coral reefs to recover pag mag-coral bleaching na sila. And that is the sad part of that. Okay, next is pathogens, parasites, and disease. Climate change and shifts in ecological conditions could support the spread of pathogens, parasites, and diseases with potentially serious effects on human health, agriculture, and fisheries. So, of course, natakol nato gaina sa katong climate impacts on forest, katong insect outbreaks. No, warming of the Earth's temperature also leads to more frequent insect outbreaks. And if nagadaghan ang insects, of course, it brings diseases. It brings mortality or death sa ato ang mga flora and fauna. And since this is a domino effect, it has a serious effect on our health, our agriculture, fisheries, and many more sectors nga wala na mention dire. And then lastly, for the climate change impacts on ecosystem is extinction risk. So climate change, along with habitat destruction and pollution, is one of the important stressors that can contribute to species extinction, no? Along with habitat destruction and pollution, which is a human-induced activity. So kinsa may nag-destroy sa habitat sa atong flora and fauna? Diba kita, humans, kinsa may nag-pollute sa atong palibot, air, water, noise, sa paylaing pollution, kinsa man ang kabuhatan, kita gihapon humans, along with climate change, which is also a human-induced activity. So it can contribute to species extinction. So the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, estimates that 20 to 30% of the plant and animal species in evaluated so far in climate change studies are at risk of extinction if temperatures continue to increase by the end of this century. Global rates of species extinctions are likely to approach or exceed the upper limit of observed natural rates of extinction in the fossil record. So imagine 20 to 30% of our plant and animal species has a chance to be extinct at the end of this century because of climate change and because of us humans. And if kani nga mga species, no, if na daghag species ang ma-extinct, kita ra gihapon ang luoy, kita ra gihapon ang affected. Okay, so that's all for the climate change impacts on ecosystem. Let's go to the climate change impacts on agriculture and food supply. So this will be the last lesson we will be tackling for climate impacts. So agriculture is an important sector of the economy. We all agree to that. Agriculture. Okay. So we'll laktaw na taana diri na ta diretso sa impacts on crops. So unsay impacts sa climate change on agricultural crops? For any particular crop, the effect of increased temperature will depend on the crop's optimal temperature for growth and reproduction. No, sa lahi-lahi man gid ang crops. Lahi-lahi siya og kanang kinahanglan na temperature para sa iyahang growth, no? Para siya motubo o para siya mamunga og daghan. So the effect of the increase of temperature depends on the crop's optimal requirements for its growth and reproduction. So in some areas, warming of the Earth's temperature may benefit the types of crops that are typically planted there, or allow farmers to shift the crops that are currently grown in warmer areas. Conversely, if the higher temperature exceeds a crop's optimum temperature, yields will decline. So, kani siya, medyo lighter side ni siya, no, on the impacts of climate change. Kay ang warm temperature, it may sometimes be beneficial to agricultural crops. No, kay naiuban crops na mas mubunga siya kung init. Pero napoy uban crops na dili makabunga kung sobraan pod ka init. So, if the temperature exceeds a crop's optimum temperature, of course, yields will decline or ang harvest will decline. So most extreme temperature and precipitation can prevent crops from growing. Extreme events, especially floods and droughts, can harm crops and reduce yield. So, of course, extreme events, no, floods and droughts, storms, wildfires, insect outbreaks, it can harm crops and it can reduce yields or it can reduce harvest. So dealing with drought could become a challenge in areas where rising summer temperatures cause soils to become drier. So ang isa sa kalaban, no, aside from warming temperature, isa sa kalaban sa agriculture sector is droughts. And then water supply. So, of course, pag drought, grabe ka init, so uga kayo ang yuta. And sometimes most of the time, it is not beneficial to a crop, no, nga uga kayo ang yuta. Pero masolusyonan siya if there is an available irrigation. So, pag na'y available nga irrigation, kaya siya solusyonan. But what if naay place nga walay irrigation? So, ang unsa mahitabo sa crops, aside sa mo-reduce ang yield, worst case scenario, mamatay o dili maka-harvest. Many weeds, pests, and fungi thrive under warmer temperatures, wetter climates, and increased carbon dioxide levels. So weeds, pests, and fungi. These are all kalaban, no, enemy of agricultural crops. So if they thrive more under warmer temperatures and increase carbon dioxide levels, so that means na ang climate change it may lead to more weeds, pests, and fungi, which will harm our agricultural crops. So rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide reduce the concentrations of protein and essential minerals in most plant species, including wheat, soybeans, and rice, our main source of food. This direct effect of rising carbon dioxide on the nutritional value of crops represents a potential threat to human health. So why is there a potential threat to human health? So akong balik-balikon, again, ang climate change, ang impacts niya is domino effect. Now, if maapektuhan ang atong agricultural crops, which ang humans nagdepende no sa agricultural crops because we need that to survive, we need that para makakaon, it will give a big threat no to human health. Now, if walay rice ma-produce because of climate change, so wala nakatubo ang mga rice, wala naka-harvest, nangamatay tanan because of climate change, because of floods, because of droughts. Therefore, dili masuplayan or dili ma-meet ang demand sa mga tao for rice. And especially Pinoy, kita mga Pinoy, we are very dependent sa rice. It may lead no to different human diseases or human illnesses. It will have a big impact to human health. Human health is also threatened by increased pesticide use due to increased pest pressures and reductions in the efficacy of pesticides. And since mudaghan ang pest, mudaghan ang insects na pwede mo atake sa atong agricultural crops, so of course, mas prone or mas magamit og pesticide ang atong mga farmers. And it will also pose a danger to our human health. Because permi na lang taani nagakonsume og crops nga daghan og pesticide, insecticide, daghan og chemicals. So at the end of the day, humans ra gihapon ang naay dako kayo nga impact nga madawat. Okay, are you imagining what I am imagining? If ever dili nato tabangan karon og mitigate ang climate change. Okay, let's move on sa impacts on livestock. So changes in climate could affect animals both directly and indirectly. Like I said, dili lang plants, no, ang naapektuhan sa climate change. So both flora and fauna, animals and plants. Heat waves, which are projected to increase under climate change, could directly threaten livestock. So over time, heat stress can increase vulnerability to disease, reduce fertility, and reduce milk production. So in summary, because of warmer temperature, because of extreme events, maapektuhan ang atong livestock. So this is just interconnected. Tanan impacts sa climate change is interconnected. No? From the impacts to the forest, impacts to the ecosystem, to agriculture and food supply, it is interconnected. Ana lang na siya. So drought may reduce the amount of quality forage available to grazing livestock. So unsa man ang forage, no? Ang mga plants nga pwede kaunon sa ato ang mga livestock. So pag naay drought, pag init kaayo, and then mamatay ang mga plants nga ginakaon sa atong livestock, it will affect them, no? It will affect their health, it will affect their consumption. So, diretso sa impacts on fisheries. So, sa fisheries pod, dako pod og impact. Many fisheries already face multiple stresses, including overfishing and water pollution. So, many aquatic species can find colder areas of streams and lakes or move north along the coast or in the ocean. So, this is what I said in the previous topics. And then naapoy ocean acidification. So maning ocean acidification. So ocean acidification, it can reduce the size and abundance of shellfish, which in turn leads to decreased harvest and eventually to changes in prices for consumers. And who are these consumers? Kita, humans, kita ang mukaon og shellfish. And ocean acidification will greatly have an impact to us. Tungod kay, mugamay man ang size, mugamay ang quantity sa atong shellfish, so mugamay ang harvest. Mo-decrease ang harvest, and if gamay ang supply, dako ang demand, the price will increase. It will eventually lead to change in prices for consumers. So basically, kita raghapon ang maapektuhan. And then international impacts. So climate change is very likely to affect food security at the global, regional, and local level. So since affected ang atong agricultural crops, it will affect food security, global, regional, and local. Nganong apil man global? No, apil ang global because naatay mga products diri nga gina-export nato. So katong mga lugar, country nga nagsalig sa ato ang agricultural crops, kung mawala tong mga agricultural crops nato dire, they will also be affected, di ba? So this is not just on local level, globally na problema. Pag mawala ang ato ang pag musubra ang impact sa atong climate change. And then climate change can disrupt food availability, reduce access to food, and affect food quality. So overall, kani nga topic on agriculture and food supply, in summary, agriculture is a very important sector sa labi na sa ato as humans, because dihaan nato ginakuha nga tong food, and without food, I don't think we will live. Without food, dili nato kaya mabuhat ang atong mga dapat buhaton. We won't have energy to go on or to go along sa atong mga activities, everyday activities. This is a big realization, not just sa inyo as my students, and not just to me as your instructor, but also to the whole world, that this will happen, this is what will happen if we don't start now, if we don't act now. And these things, kato ako mga na-discuss, I know nga you don't want that to happen. You don't want the next generation to experience that. So as much as possible, let us start now. Let us educate ourselves para ma-educate po nato ang ubang tao. So that's all for this lesson. I hope you learned something, and see you in our next topic. Bye!